Anything is they don't know what to do. And I've spent the last 3 weeks, I said it in the speech that I gave at ARC, in a pretty dark place, because I like to think I'm a pretty clever guy. I talk to people like you who are way more clever than me, and to many others. And I say to them the same thing. How does this get fixed? Because what I see is we have an open border. And there is, despite the fact, there was a poll done in recent weeks which showed that 92% of Conservative voters and 70% of Labour voters, which was higher than I expected, support deporting people who glorify terrorism. And yet we sit here, all three of us, knowing full well, as everybody watching this does, that despite the fact that we have a quote-unquote far-right government, that is never, ever going to happen.
Well, it might not happen under this government, but it'll happen under one in the future. The first thing is the British public is totally right. I do not want to live in a country with Hamas supporters. I want them deported. I want them chucked out. Simple. And I will do everything I can to ensure that happens. I am fed up, by the way, of the centrist dad hand-wringing era, where people say, oh, but might it be against our liberal values? And might our liberalism... I'm not as interested in that as I am in Britain remaining Britain. I am much more interested in that. At every time of national emergency in our nation's history, we gave something up to survive. We did in the Napoleonic Wars, we did in the wars of the 20th century, and we will have to now. This is the thing we give up, extending tolerance to people who do not extend it back to us. It should be over, that era. The first person who must be deported from the UK and have his citizenship withdrawn is a man called Mohammed Sawalha who lives in North London. I'm happy to start handing out his address if need be. Mohammed Sawalha is a former military commander of Hamas in the West Bank. He has been living peacefully in the UK, that is undisturbedly, I should say, undisturbed in the UK for many years now. Under the last Labour government, he seems to have got UK citizenship. Now, to get UK citizenship, you have, among other things, to show that you're a person of good character. I would submit that if you are a military commander of Hamas, you are not a person of good character. Now, what is to be done about this man? He is currently not in the UK. He is in Istanbul. And again, I'm very happy to give out his location, should people want it. I do not want that man back in my country. I don't want him here. If he arrives back here, he should be arrested and deported. Now, I would also like him to go to the Gaza. Mohammed Sawalha should not be in the UK. The name of this man is now out there. It was put on the front page of the Sunday Times a couple of weeks ago. I immediately got my lawyers to write to the Home Secretary, the Prime Minister, the Director of Public Prosecutions, and the Attorney General, saying that if they do not prosecute him, I will get a prosecution myself. This man cannot live in my country. He will be the first, and we will see how many more need to come after him. He should not have British citizenship. We do not want him here. We have not benefited from his being here. Let me throw one other name straight out there who should be on the same list. A man called Mohajerani, the former Deputy Prime Minister of Iran. He lives in Harrow. Again, I'm very happy to start giving his address out. Why does he live in Leafy Harrow, this man? We don't know. The last Labour government gave him right to remain in the UK. Who is Mohajerani? Two things might be of interest. One, he was the man who the Ayatollah Khomeini got to write the book-length justification of the fatwa calling for the murder of the British novelist Salman Rushdie. Why is Salman Rushdie's life in such peril and has been since Valentine's Day 1989, and Mohajerani lives peacefully in Leafy Harrow? I don't want him to. Second, apart from justifying and calling for the murder of a British novelist, Mohajerani was also involved in the prison massacres of leftists and communists in Iran in the 1980s. One of his former colleagues has been prosecuted for war crimes in a European court in the last year. I see no reason why Mohajerani should not also be prosecuted under the same crimes. Why should we live with these people? Why should they be here? My forebears didn't fight off generation after generation of enemies, only to have these enemies given the right to remain here. We'd have no need of them. Our country has not benefited from them. Get them out. Get them out. And if the government will not do it, at some point the people will do it. And I would submit that will be much uglier.
And it's...
Man, oh man, what is it with you folks on the other side of the pond? You Brits, come on. I know it's not the average citizen, folks, that's out there. If the average citizen had their say, and they do, they don't want these people in the country. They don't want these people to get citizenship. But like Douglas said, somehow in the Labour government, both these two terrorists, these two Islamists, fundamentalists, somehow were given the ability to stay, live cushy lives, probably given a house. These people, they siphon off millions and millions of dollars, have them probably, stowed away up in Switzerland in the banks. Speaking of banks, I wonder if the British government or the British banks are investigating these people, how they got their money. No, but they go after Nigel Farage and other conservatives and say, you know what, your banking is suspect. We need to investigate where you're getting your funds from. Whether you have two terrorist Islamists from Iran who are living high on the hog in Britain, probably on British taxpayer money. I don't know that for certain or whatever, but I'm sure there was some things given to these people. And yet, I love the fact that Douglas is literally going in there and saying, you know what, if you want, I'll give you their names. Absolutely. Nothing wrong with that. Freedom of information, freedom of speech, freedom of the press. He's more than legally, he has nothing inside there. He can give out an address of somebody. It's public knowledge. That's exactly what needs to be done. But like he said, he doesn't want them in his country. People don't want him in his country. These two are spitting in the face of the British government and the average citizen in Britain who basically does not want. And as far as, that's right, you sympathize with a foreign government, a foreign entity, and you sympathize with them, and you like the fact that they're committing terrorist acts, and you would like them to continue committing terrorist acts, you have no business being a citizen or a sovereign national of the UK or anywhere else, I might add. Anyways, folks, that's what's on tap for you today. We've got Douglas Murray being interviewed by Konstantin Kisin and Foster. And listen, I want to give you my political prescription from my political perspective. When you've got these gentlemen sitting together talking about culture, religion, Islamists, what do you do about Hamas supporters or ISIS supporters or Al-Qaeda supporters, or you support terrorists or fundamentalists? What do you do? What's the opinion? Let's get back to more of the debate right now.
I would have said, this is too far. But the thing, even above the Sir David Amos and coming as a former teacher, the thing that really opened my eyes to the cowardice within our institutions was the Batley Grammar School case.
Yes, absolutely. Shameful.
And the capitulation of the union, the refusal to stand by their member, which is a working class tradition going back generations.
One of the finest traditions of the unions.
And they just abdicated responsibility. And it just shows, for me, that there is very few people in power who've got the backbone to be willing to tackle this.
They don't have the cojones, they don't have the balls.
Well, the people who do want to tackle it will come to power.
Well, Douglas, this is a thing that has been discussed, and I want to raise with you. I mean, I agree with you. And I saw Ron DeSantis, the American presidential candidate. He gave a speech in which he said, the point of immigration is to bring people who are going to benefit our country. And I thought, I haven't heard someone say that for about 20 years. As a politician.
UK.
Yeah, quite. Which to me seems like a fairly uncontroversial statement, actually. But the argument that I see going around online, I mean, these people specifically that you're talking about, I think few would argue about. But
Oh, I bet they would. Anyway, well, if they don't argue about it, why not do it?
quite. And I want to come back to that as well. But the one
Douglas,
thing I
man.
see is particularly American commentators say, well, look, the right in particular has been banging on about free speech endlessly. And then you have these people go out on a protest and suddenly everyone's saying they should be deported. What do you say to those people?
First of all, not everyone's saying they should be deported. A small number of us are. Yeah, I have some friends on the sort of libertarian right, as it were, as well as people on the left who say, but you're such a free speech activist. How could you deny the rights of free speech to people who simply want to stand outside synagogues taunting Jews for the murder of their fellow Jews? Well, this is not a practice of free speech. This is not an interesting test case of free speech. It's very straightforward. Throughout our history, as I mentioned earlier, we have repeatedly been willing to say that certain things trump our most cherished values, and the main one is our ability to survive. I would say that at the moment we are at a very important point, not least with policing in the UK. The protests
my
have taken place
goodness.
in recent weeks, and the protests that have
policing
already been
sucks.
announced for weeks ahead have been a great test for the Metropolitan Police and other police forces across the UK. And it is a test that they have failed monumentally. Now, I know the
So
policing
true.
decision they've made.
So true.
Part of the policing decision, clearly, is that they will observe the crowd and they will see if anyone breaks the law. And if they do break the law, they may get a visit at some point later from the police and they may be arrested. This happened in the 2000s with Anjem Chowdhury and the group members of Al-Mujahirun. There was a very similar thing. There was once actually an occasion when Al-Mujahirun came for me personally in the streets of London, and I was amazed that the British police didn't do more to protect me or, well, anyway. And it turned out that they were doing the same thing, which is they hang back in order to arrest people later.
Cowardice,
Well,
cowardice,
here's the problem with
cowardice.
that. The world only sees the crime being committed. The world does not see the follow-up. The world is very interested in watching the streets of London at the moment and are horrified by what they see. They do not see the tiny number of arrests that the Metropolitan Police has been willing to actually carry out of people who are supporting Hamas on our streets.
And not only that, by the way, Douglas, we saw a couple of years ago people who drove down from Blackburn, quite far away from London, to go into Jewish areas and through megaphones shout, rape Jewish women, kill Jewish women.
That shouldn't be allowed under free speech laws.
Those people were arrested and not prosecuted.
Yes.
Maybe they should have tweeted it.
BS.
Yeah, they should have
BS.
called them, what was the crime that Lawrence Fox committed again that brought the whole world crashing down a few weeks ago?
They should have said they wouldn't shag them, which is
Yes,
the opposite
exactly.
of what they seem to be.
Wasn't that a good idea? They should have gone through Jewish areas saying, I wouldn't shag them. That would have got the police interested and probably Ofcom. That would have got the Guardian going for months. My God, we've been diverted, haven't we? Here's the thing. The police are also, of course, in this strange case of several cases we now have on camera of the police taking down the posters of missing, stolen Jewish children that have been put up in London and other places, and as well as being
What
ripped
the
down
hell is
by
that?
Muslims in the UK and leftists in the UK.
That's just
They're
absolute
also
bullshit
now being taken
again.
down by police in the UK. We have footage of the Metropolitan Police taking down these posters. Two things about that, if I may. The first is we should follow the example of some blue-collar workers in New York and elsewhere in America recently who have found these scumbags taking down posters and confronted them. If
Yes.
the police are not going to confront people ripping down posters and trying to hurt Jews on the streets of Britain, again, I would like the public to do so. And I think the public should start to do so. And that is what will happen if the police do not protect the public. The public will have to start protecting the public. The second thing...
May I just on that?
Sure.
Aren't we being slightly dishonest there, Douglas, the demographic situation in the UK is very different.
It is.
I don't know that if I was to challenge somebody in the street doing that I, frankly, at this point would have the support of the people around me. I wonder if I might find myself in the minority.
Okay, well, what will happen at some point is that a group of people who are in a majority will come down from some other part of of the UK, and they'll do it themselves. And who would say that that was a bad thing?
At this point, yeah.
At this point, if this is all on the table, they're going to regret it. The police are going to deeply regret this. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, and let me be as clear as possible on this, the police clearly seem to think in the UK that the big problem is that it is provocative to put up posters of abducted Jewish children, and that is because it will provoke community tensions. This, by the way, is not a fringe view. It is a view clearly shared by a number of politicians across the UK, most prominently certain Muslim politicians across the UK. Here, let us be totally frank.
Please.
If there are people in the UK who are offended by the posters of missing Jewish children, they must leave the UK. We do not want them.
Wow.
It is not Jews who should be fearful in the UK. It is the people who would make Jews fearful. They must leave. It is shameful to me that in the last few weeks, I have had friends from around the world, including Jewish friends, saying, is it safe any longer to come to England, to come to Britain, specifically to come to London? It is not Jews who should fear being in London. It is the people who would make them fearful.
Absolutely.
So at some point, the Jews, who are a very small minority in the UK, a little over 200,000, they are dwarfed by the large size of the Muslim community in the UK at the moment, but fine. The non-Muslim population of the UK is far larger. And by and large, in my experience, they are very good people. The British still have pride in their past that has not been beaten out of them. They still have a sense of the goodness of our nation.
Absolutely.
The pride of our nation, of what it has done in the past that we should be grateful for and proud of.
Continue to do so in the future.
Now.
Absolutely.
Despite decades of indoctrination to try to tell us that we are wicked, that is really only believed by a small number of people who happen to have control of many of the major institutions and who have a disproportionate voice in the media and a disproportionate presence in what used to be called academia.
Same in America. Same in America. Absolutely.
Do you not worry, Douglas, that with what you're saying, that we're going to be pretty soon, not that you're advocating, I want to make that clear, that we're going to be on the path to a pretty unpleasant government pretty soon?
Well, we've got Starmer, of course, but that's a different thing. But what we'll have is, this will all be suppressed again and again and again until you can't suppress it anymore. And it will not be a matter of party affiliation or parties in power. It will simply start to happen on the streets. The British public are being pushed beyond our endurance. And
there will become a breaking point.
A political outlet, I think that a large number of people will start to think we don't have a political outlet. The Home Secretary and the government say things, and yet they do not happen.
Cowards.
The Labour Party say things and promise things, and yet they do not happen. I'm old enough to remember when the last Labour government, whilst ratcheting up mass immigration into the UK, talked about the dangers of mass immigration. I well remember people like, what was his name? There was a Labour immigration minister in about 2007 who gave a front-page interview to the Times of London, which he talked about the downsides of multiculturalism, how everything had gone wrong with it, and we needed to get control of our borders. We've heard these people from right and left, Labour and Conservative. None of them ever do what they say, and
never.
It seems
they never do
they can't.
anything.
So I very much fear, again, as you say, I'm not advocating it, I'm observing it. I very much fear that in the years ahead, this is past the parties. More people are members of the Birdwatchers Association of the UK than belong to all of the nation's political parties. So clearly people don't believe that political parties are the way forward, or able to do anything, or anything much. So we'll see what's happened. But you know, the public didn't get us here. I was asked by a senior member of the BBC shortly after the atrocities of 2017 what I thought had gone wrong and why the BBC and others were now incapable of speaking to the general public and were missing the general public. And I remember this person
They've gone
said to me,
left.
"What should we do, Douglas?" And I said, "It's a bit late now,
Yep.
isn't it?"
So
I
true.
said, "I feel when you ask me this and expect my answer,
It's like the
like
New York
somebody who has
crimes.
been pushed deliberately into a swimming pool in their full clothing and then asked why they're wet. I didn't want to be here. I didn't want my nation to be here. But we've been pushed here. We'll see what we do."
Douglas, I want to ask you about the role of the BBC and the media more generally, but we'll continue this conversation on locals. We'll do about 40 minutes or so on there because we've done almost an hour here. So follow us over there.
So Douglas, painting a picture there that's, I don't know, I look at it and think that's kind of a sort of grim-like, meaning that if the police are not going to step in, the public will. The public will do the job of the police. I mean, you're going to have groups that are coming up. I mean, isn't that sort of, what happened with the birth of the EDL? That's just, but it's just so unfortunate that the levers of power that are supposed to protect the public, that is the number one thing that these institutions are supposed to do. Protect the general public from harm. And yet, they're siding with the people that are either doing the violence, perpetrating the violence, or calling for the perpetration of violence or the incitement of violence. But yet the police have no problem going to someone's house, knocking on the door or breaking in and basically saying that you were online on Twitter or on Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat or whatever the hell social media crap, version, modality you were on, and you said that someone was an idiot, fat, wasn't a man, wasn't a woman, you misgendered somebody, and we need to arrest your what. And then you appear in court, you pay a fine, you're found guilty of calling somebody fat, or calling a man a woman, or a woman a man, or saying that a man can't be a woman and a woman can't be a man, or you don't want to use pronouns, or called somebody a wrong pronoun, or somebody just made some lie up about you, but the court took it as truth. Community service, sometimes you go to freaking jail. Mostly people, probably the common man, the common woman. And that's what happens in the United Kingdom. And people wonder what the hell's going on. That's what happens here, folks. It's what we call country class versus country club class. People say there's two different levels of, of punishment, two different levels of justice in America. It's like the Hillary Clintons and the establishment and the elites and then the regular people, that if we had done a tenth of what those people did, we'd be handcuffed behind our backs, perp walked out of our homes at the point of guns, SWAT team, 20, 30 people there with rifles and machine guns pointed at your kids and your wife and and anybody else that are family members there. And you taken out of your home in the middle of the morning, all because, you had the audacity to say something wrong against somebody in power. But somebody in power says the same thing and nothing happens to them. No, they get called to come on a show, MSLSD or one of the Alphabet or the Google networks. Two-tier form of justice. I think there's more than two-tier form of justice that happens in the United States and obviously in Britain. The haves and the have-nots. And this happens on both sides of the aisle. Labor, conservative over across the pond. You got conservative and Democrats and Republicans over here on this side of the Atlantic. It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate, but that's what happens. If you've got money, if you've got the power, you might be able to escape the wrath of justice because the scales don't balance equally. They're heavily weighted on the elite, the establishment class, what we call the country club class. What do we say all the time? What do? They make rules for thee, but not for the we, the establishment and the elites. Anyways, folks, we appreciate you taking the time to watch. You've been watching the Dr. Nasir Shaikh Show. Hope you enjoyed this this conversation, this interview with Douglas Murray and Konstantin Kisin. We'd love for you to go ahead, smack that subscription bell if you like our content. Like, share, and follow us. You all know what to do. And I'll leave you with my final thought, which is, when you're right, you're right. And when you're left, you're wrong. Until next time, folks, take care and stay safe.